Life is often a journey of constant uncertainty, a road that seems to be paved with obstacles, detours, and unexpected turns. We are constantly presented with situations that challenge our sense of control, and in these moments, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, anxious, or helpless. Many times we spend hours, days, or even years trying to control what we cannot, whether it's worrying about our future, our relationships, our health, or the world around us. The truth is that there are countless things beyond our ability to control, and this often is the root of much of our stress. The idea of trusting God with what you cannot control is an invitation to let go of that burden of control. It's about recognizing that while we may have influence over some aspects of our lives, there are greater forces, often unseen, that shape our journey. In these moments, faith becomes the anchor and trust becomes the key to peace. It's not about ignoring responsibility or abandoning the need for action. Rather, it's about understanding the limits of our power and learning to surrender those things that we cannot change into the hands of something greater. We all have moments when we feel the weight of the world on our shoulders. Maybe it's a job loss, a health scare, or the breakdown of a relationship. In these moments, we often react out of fear, desperation, or frustration. We attempt to fix things ourselves, and when they don't immediately resolve, we spiral into worry. But here's the thing about worry. It is a futile exercise. It does not change the outcome of a situation. It only robs us of peace and joy in the present moment. And when we try to control everything, we often create more chaos than solutions. Now, to trust God with what we cannot control doesn't mean that we sit back passively and let life happen to us. Faith is not the absence of action, but the presence of trust in a higher purpose. It means knowing that there are things in life that we are not meant to understand, and that's okay. Trusting God means recognizing that our understanding is limited, but His wisdom is infinite. We may not have the answers to every question, but we can rest assured that there is a plan for us that is far greater than we can imagine. Imagine trying to navigate a complex maze with only partial visibility. You can see the path directly in front of you, but you have no idea what lies ahead. Every decision you make feels heavy, and every misstep causes anxiety. But now imagine that there's someone standing outside the maze, someone who has the complete view and knows the best path forward. If you trusted that person, would you still try to force your way through the maze yourself? Or would you listen to their guidance and allow them to lead you out? This is what faith in God offers us, the opportunity to step back and trust that there's a greater plan at work. When we stop worrying about every twist and turn, when we release the need to control every outcome, we open ourselves to peace. Trusting God with what we cannot control is about surrendering our anxieties and embracing the idea that the universe is unfolding just as it should, even when we don't understand the bigger picture. Consider the story of the Israelites in the Bible. They found themselves trapped between the Red Sea and the pursuing Egyptian army. It seemed like an impossible situation. The people were terrified, and even Moses, their leader, faced doubt and fear. But in that moment of crisis, God instructed Moses to stretch out his hand over the sea. And when Moses obeyed, the waters parted, and the Israelites walked through on dry ground to safety. Now, imagine if the Israelites had spent their time panicking and trying to find ways to fight the Egyptian army or find another way out. They would have missed the miracle. Sometimes we find ourselves at the Red Sea in our own lives. We look at the situation in front of us and see no way out. Our minds race with ideas of how we can fix things, but those solutions seem impossible. But perhaps in those moments, what we're being asked to do is simply trust that God has a way when we can't see one. Trust doesn't mean inaction. It means surrendering the outcome to God while still doing what we can in the moment. There's a powerful peace that comes with trusting God. It's the kind of peace that surpasses understanding. When we let go of our need to control everything, when we stop holding on so tightly to our fears, we open ourselves to something greater. Trusting in God doesn't mean that everything will always go the way we want it to. It doesn't mean that there won't be struggles, challenges, or pain. But it does mean that we can face those challenges with a sense of hope, knowing that we are not alone. We are not left to navigate life on our own. The key here is faith. It's a choice to trust even when the circumstances don't align with our desires. It's choosing to believe that we don't have to have all the answers to feel secure. It's understanding that while we may not be able to control what happens around us, we can always control how we respond. And in every response, we can choose faith over fear, trust over anxiety, and peace over worry. In those moments of difficulty, when you feel like you're holding on to the reins of your life and they're slipping through your fingers, take a moment to breathe. Take a step back and remember that there is a greater force at work. Trust that God is holding you, even when it feels like everything is falling apart. You are not alone in this journey. The weight of the world does not rest solely on your shoulders. We live in a world that constantly urges us to do more, to achieve more, to be more. We're bombarded with messages telling us that we must be in control, that success is ours to create, and that failure is something to be avoided at all costs. But this often leads to burnout, stress, and a sense of emptiness. The pressure to control everything can drain us, leaving us exhausted and anxious. But when we shift our mindset and trust that there are things beyond our control, we can start to experience a sense of relief. We don't have to carry the weight of everything. We can take our worries, our fears, and our uncertainties and lay them down at the feet of God. We can trust that He will take care of the things we cannot. And when we do this, we free ourselves from the constant pressure of trying to control the uncontrollable. Faith gives us the courage to face the unknown. It empowers us to move forward even when the path ahead is unclear. It allows us to live with an open heart, unburdened by the weight of worry. When we trust God with what we cannot control, we find a peace that transcends understanding, a peace that anchors us in the midst of life's storm. So, what can we do in practical terms to trust God with what we cannot control? First, it begins with a shift in mindset. Recognize that not everything is in your hands. Some things are simply beyond your control, and that's okay. Let go of the need to micromanage every aspect of your life. Instead, focus on what you can control: your thoughts, your actions, your attitude. Second, develop a practice of surrender. This might mean taking time each day to pray, meditate, or reflect on the things that weigh heavy on your heart. Instead of holding on to them tightly, offer them up in prayer and ask God to take care of them. Trust that He knows what is best. Third, surround yourself with support. Reach out to others who share your faith and values. Find a community that will encourage you to trust in God's plan and help you navigate moments of doubt. Faith is often strengthened in community, and having people around you who understand and support you can make all the difference. Finally, practice patience. Trusting God is not always easy, and it doesn't always happen overnight. But the more we practice, the easier it becomes. Each day is an opportunity to release a little bit more of our need for control and to trust a little more in the one who holds the world in His hands. In the end, the peace that comes from trusting God with what we cannot control is worth more than anything we could ever achieve through our own efforts. When we release our anxieties, we gain the freedom to live in the present moment, to enjoy the beauty of life, and to experience the joy that comes from knowing that we are held in the loving hands of a higher power. Let go, trust God, and find peace in the surrender. In today's world, control is often seen as a symbol of success, stability, and security. We are conditioned to believe that in order to thrive, we must be in charge of every aspect of our lives, our careers, finances, health, relationships, and even our emotional well-being. Society pushes us to plan meticulously, to act decisively, and to create an image of perfection in every area. As a result, many of us end up carrying a weight that over time becomes unbearable. The weight of control. We think that if we can manage everything around us, if we can hold on tight to every detail, then we can avoid failure, disappointment, and chaos. But what we often fail to realize is that control, while seemingly empowering, can be incredibly draining. It can lead to exhaustion, fear, and a deep sense of frustration when things inevitably don't go as planned. The problem with trying to control everything is that life by nature is unpredictable. We don't have the power to predict every turn, to foresee every challenge, or to manipulate every outcome. Despite our best efforts, the future remains uncertain, and we are often forced to confront the limitations of our influence. Relationships, too, are beyond our full control. We can't force someone to love us, to understand us, or to change their behaviors. Our health is another area where we have little authority. Despite our best attempts at eating well, exercising, and avoiding risks, illness and accidents can still strike unexpectedly. We can do everything right, and yet life still throws curveballs we weren't prepared for. The more we try to control these situations, the more overwhelmed we become. And in our attempt to hold everything together, we end up holding on to the very thing that is causing our stress, the need to control. The constant effort to maintain control often leads us to a place of anxiety. We become so consumed with trying to anticipate every scenario that we forget to live in the present. Our minds race with worries about the future, what might happen, what could go wrong, what we should do next. This fear of the unknown leads us to try to grip even tighter onto the steering wheel of our lives. But in doing so, we forget to trust that we don't have to bear all of the weight alone. And this anxiety grows. It becomes a constant hum in the background of our thoughts, always there, always reminding us of what might go wrong. The longer we try to control everything, the harder it becomes to let go. It feels like an impossible task to simply release our grip on things we've been holding so tightly for so long. Trusting God with what we cannot control is not an easy step, but it is a liberating one. It is an invitation to surrender, an invitation to stop trying to force outcomes and start living in faith. Surrender does not mean passivity or neglect. It does not mean that we stop caring about the future or that we give up on our dreams and responsibilities. Rather, it means that we acknowledge that some things are beyond our control and that we trust a higher power to take care of the things we cannot manage. It's about releasing the need to manipulate outcomes and opening ourselves up to the possibility that there is a bigger plan in motion, one that may not align with our expectations, but is ultimately for our good. Surrendering control to God is a process, and it is not something that happens overnight. It requires us to confront our fears, to wrestle with our doubts, and to let go of our desire for certainty. But in the act of surrender, we begin to feel a sense of peace that is not based on the predictability of life circumstances. Instead, it is rooted in the trust that God is with us, guiding us even when we cannot see the path ahead. The more we practice surrender, the easier it becomes to let go of the need to control everything. We realize that we don't have to bear the burden of life on our own shoulders. There is freedom in releasing the need for constant control and placing our trust in something greater than ourselves. In the moments when we are overwhelmed by life's uncertainties, we must remind ourselves that we don't have to have all the answers, and we don't have to figure it all out. Trusting God with the things we cannot control allows us to stop struggling against the tide of life. We can breathe a little easier knowing that we are not alone in our challenges. We can trust that God is working behind the scenes, orchestrating things in ways we may never fully understand, but can still have confidence in. There is immense power in surrendering the burden of control. It is not a sign of weakness, but of strength. It is a strength that comes from faith. Faith that we do not need to know every detail. Faith that we do not need to have our hands on every situation. It is a strength that allows us to embrace uncertainty with peace, knowing that we are held by a higher power, a loving God who is bigger than any problem we face. When we let go of control, we are free to live more fully in the present. We no longer waste precious energy on trying to manipulate outcomes, but instead, we can focus on doing what we can in the moment and trusting God to handle the rest. The truth is, we can't control everything, and that's okay. In fact, it's more than okay. It's the way things are meant to be. Control is not the key to peace, nor is it the path to happiness. The path to peace lies in surrender, surrendering our worries, our anxieties, and our need for control to God. And in doing so, we find that the weight of the world no longer rests on our shoulders. Instead, we are held in the loving arms of a God who knows what is best for us. Faith is often misunderstood as passivity, as though trusting in God means simply sitting back and waiting for life to unfold, but this interpretation couldn't be further from the truth. Trusting God does not mean being inactive, indifferent, or apathetic toward life's challenges. Rather, faith is an active choice, a decision to continue moving forward even when we don't know what lies ahead. It is the confidence that despite not having all the answers, we can still make decisions, take steps, and act, trusting that God's plan is unfolding in ways we may not yet comprehend. When we place our trust in God, it doesn't absolve us of responsibility. We are still called to act, to work, and to make choices in our lives. Faith does not negate the need for effort. Instead, it provides us with a foundation of peace and confidence that allows us to take action, even in the face of uncertainty. We may not have control over every outcome, but we can act with purpose and direction, knowing that God is guiding us through each step. Consider the story of Abraham, one of the most well-known figures in the Bible, who exemplifies faith in action. Abraham was called by God to leave his home, his family, and everything he knew to embark on a journey to an unknown land. He didn't have a detailed map or an exact destination, but he trusted God's promise that he would lead him. Abraham's faith wasn't just a matter of waiting for something to happen. It was about actively moving forward, even without knowing where he was going or how everything would unfold. He acted on the belief that God had a plan for him, and that was enough to propel him forward, even in the face of uncertainty. Faith is not a passive surrender of our lives to fate or an excuse for inaction. Rather, it is an active trust in God's wisdom, timing, and purpose. It means that we take action when needed, but we do so with a heart that is open to God's will. It's about moving forward with confidence, even when the path ahead seems unclear or when the circumstances seem out of our control. Faith allows us to take the next step, knowing that God is guiding us, even if we don't yet see the full picture. One of the most powerful aspects of faith is the ability to trust beyond understanding. We are often faced with situations in life where the answer isn't immediately clear, where the solution isn't evident, and where we can't fully see what the outcome will be. In these moments, trusting God means acknowledging that we don't need to have all the answers. It means letting go of the need for certainty and embracing the mystery of God's plan. We may not understand why things are happening the way they are or why certain doors are closing, but faith tells us that there is a greater purpose at work. There is a level of surrender in trusting God that goes beyond logic and reason. It's about understanding that our limited perspective cannot fully grasp the vastness of God's plan for our lives. We may not always understand why we face certain challenges, why we experience pain, or why things don't turn out the way we expected. But through faith, we trust that God sees the bigger picture. We trust that He is leading us to a place of growth, transformation, and purpose, even when the journey is difficult or the path is unclear. In our daily lives, this kind of faith allows us to make decisions without being paralyzed by fear or doubt. When we face a difficult choice or a life-changing decision, trusting God means stepping forward with confidence, knowing that even if we make mistakes, He will guide us back on track. It's about acting in faith, taking the next step, and trusting that God's presence will be with us even when the way forward seems uncertain. This doesn't mean we won't experience fear or doubt. It means that despite those feelings, we continue to move forward with the knowledge that God is in control. Faith in action also allows us to let go of the pressure of having to have everything figured out. In a world that often demands that we plan every detail and anticipate every possible outcome, faith gives us the freedom to act with less anxiety about the future. We can take steps without having the full picture, knowing that God will guide us as we go. Trusting God beyond understanding means that we don't have to wait until everything is perfect or fully clear before we act. We can step forward in faith, trusting that God will provide the next step when we need it. At the same time, faith isn't just about personal decisions. It also affects the way we approach challenges and adversity. When life feels overwhelming or when we face trials that seem insurmountable, faith reminds us that God is bigger than any obstacle we encounter. It's easy to become discouraged when things aren't going our way, but faith empowers us to keep going even when we don't see an immediate solution. It reminds us that God can use every circumstance, every challenge, every setback, and every disappointment for a purpose greater than we can understand in the moment. In times of uncertainty, faith allows us to persevere with hope, trusting that God is working behind the scenes. It encourages us to keep going even when the way is unclear, because we know that God is leading us with wisdom and love. Faith is not about giving up or sitting back. It's about trusting God's plan so deeply that we continue to act with confidence, knowing that He will guide us through the unknown. Ultimately, faith is not about having all the answers, nor is it about waiting for everything to fall perfectly into place. It is about moving forward in trust even when we don't fully understand what's happening around us. It's about trusting that God's plan is bigger and more intricate than anything we could ever imagine. When we live by faith, we don't need to have every detail figured out. We simply need to trust that God will show us the next step. And with each step, our confidence grows, our trust deepens, and we become more attuned to His guidance, knowing that He is with us every step of the way. Faith, then, is not inaction. It is the bold, trusting movement forward, knowing that God's plan will unfold in its own time and that we are part of something much bigger than we can see. Worry is something that nearly everyone experiences at some point in their lives. It's a natural reaction to uncertainty, to situations that feel out of our control, or to things that challenge our sense of security. Whether it's about our health, relationships, finances, or the future, the human tendency is to fixate on problems, trying to anticipate every possible outcome. We think that by worrying, we are somehow preparing ourselves for the worst or finding a way to control what's happening. But in reality, worry does nothing but drain us. It takes a mental and emotional toll, leaving us feeling anxious, exhausted, and overwhelmed. Worrying about things that are beyond our control becomes a trap where we become stuck in an endless cycle of fear and uncertainty, unable to break free. When we worry, we often feel as though we are doing something productive. We tell ourselves that if we just think about it enough, we will find the solution, or that by worrying, we are somehow exerting control over a situation. However, what we fail to recognize is that worry does not change the reality of the situation. It does not alter outcomes, and it doesn't fix problems. It only magnifies our fear and makes us feel more helpless. The reality is that worrying about things outside our control does nothing to help us. It doesn't change the future, it doesn't give us the answers, and it certainly doesn't bring peace. It only robs us of the mental clarity and emotional energy we need to face challenges with strength and resilience. When we're caught in the cycle of worry, we become hyper-focused on potential outcomes, often imagining the worst-case scenario. Our minds race with what-ifs. What if I lose my job? What if I get sick? What if this relationship falls apart? What if my plans don't work out? This constant replaying of worst-case scenarios keeps us stuck in a state of fear and anxiety, but what we must realize is that worrying about all these potential problems does not prepare us for them. It only takes away the joy and peace we could be experiencing in the present. In fact, worrying too much about the future can make us miss the blessings and opportunities right in front of us. Instead of living fully in the moment, we become consumed with the things we cannot control, and in doing so, we make ourselves more vulnerable to stress and burnout. One of the most profound truths about worrying is that it is completely futile. No amount of worrying can change the outcome of a situation. If we worry about a job interview, it doesn't make us more prepared or increase our chances of success. If we worry about a health diagnosis, it doesn't change the diagnosis itself. Worrying about the future or about things that are beyond our control doesn't have any power to alter what will happen. It simply drains our energy and peace of mind. It's like trying to control the weather. No matter how hard we try, we can't make the rain stop or the sun come out. In the same way, worry does not give us control over the future or change anything in the present. So why do we continue to worry even when we know it serves no purpose? The answer is often fear. We worry because we're afraid of what might happen. We fear the unknown, the unexpected, and the things that are beyond our control. But in holding on to worry, we create a false sense of security as if our anxiety is somehow going to protect us from negative outcomes. In truth, worrying does the opposite. It makes us feel powerless. It makes us believe that we are at the mercy of circumstances rather than trusting that there is a greater plan unfolding. What if we could release that worry and trust that things will work out in the way they are meant to? Trusting God with our concerns is a way to break free from the grip of worry. When we place our trust in Him, we acknowledge that there are things we cannot control, but that we don't need to bear the burden alone. By trusting that God is at work in our lives, even when we can't see it, we release the need to carry the weight of our worries. We let go of the illusion that we must have everything figured out and embrace the peace that comes with trusting in His timing and wisdom. Trusting God doesn't mean that we won't face challenges or that we'll never experience moments of fear. It simply means that we are no longer carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. It means that instead of worrying about what might happen, we can trust that God has a plan for our lives and that He will guide us through whatever comes our way. Trust is the antidote to worry. When we trust that God is working all things together for our good, even when we can't see how, we can experience a sense of peace that transcends our circumstances. We are freed from the constant cycle of anxious thinking and can face life with a calm and steady heart. When we choose to trust God, we are embracing a sense of security that goes beyond the fleeting assurances of the world. The world tells us that we must always be in control, that we must have everything planned out, and that we must anticipate every possible outcome. But in truth, life is unpredictable and we cannot control everything. Trusting God means acknowledging that the future is in His hands, not ours. We may not know what tomorrow holds, but we can trust that God does and that He will guide us through whatever comes. This trust isn't passive. It requires an active decision to release our worries and place them in God's hands. It's about choosing to let go of the fear that tries to take root in our hearts and instead replace it with faith. It's about choosing to believe that even when things don't go according to our plans, God is still in control. It's about trusting that He sees the bigger picture, even when we can only see a small part of it. The truth is that worrying doesn't add a single moment to our lives. In fact, it often robs us of the moments we could be enjoying. By choosing to trust God instead of worrying, we give ourselves permission to experience peace, to rest in His promises, and to let go of the false illusion that we have to control everything. The next time you find yourself caught in the grip of worry, remember this: worry cannot change the outcome, but trust can bring peace. By releasing your worries to God, you can find rest, knowing that He is at work, even in the midst of uncertainty. Life is full of challenges and difficulties, some of which seem insurmountable. Whether it's a personal crisis, financial hardship, relationship struggle, or health scare, these situations can often feel like we are standing at the edge of a Red Sea, facing an obstacle that we cannot cross with no visible way forward. In these moments, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, confused, and powerless. It's in these difficult situations that faith becomes not just a comfort, but a necessity. Faith provides the strength and resilience we need to press on, even when the path forward seems unclear or impossible. It is through trusting God in these moments that we can witness the miraculous, as He often works in ways that we cannot see or understand at the time. One of the most powerful reminders of the importance of faith in difficult times comes from the story of the Israelites at the Red Sea. After being freed from slavery in Egypt, the Israelites found themselves trapped between Pharaoh's army and the Red Sea, with no apparent way of escape. On one side, they faced the vast, impassable waters, and on the other, they were being pursued by an army bent on their destruction. It seemed like a hopeless situation. No matter which way they turned, there was no way out. The people cried out to Moses in despair, but Moses, full of faith, reassured them with these words: "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Exodus 14:13-14. And in that moment of crisis, when all seemed lost, God made a way for them. He parted the Red Sea, allowing the Israelites to walk through on dry land, while the pursuing army was swallowed up by the returning waters. The story of the Red Sea is a powerful reminder that even in our most difficult moments, faith in God can bring about miraculous outcomes. When we face situations that seem beyond our control, when the way forward is unclear, it's easy to feel like there is no hope. But God has a way of turning even the most hopeless situations into opportunities for His glory. It's often in our deepest moments of struggle that we experience His power most vividly. When we trust in Him, even when everything around us suggests that there's no way out, we open ourselves to the possibility of the miraculous. What seems impossible to us is not impossible for God. Trusting God in difficult situations doesn't mean that we won't feel fear or doubt. It's a natural part of the human experience. But faith allows us to face those fears with the assurance that God is in control. It gives us the courage to move forward, even when the way is uncertain, knowing that He will provide a way. Faith helps us shift our focus from the size of our problem to the greatness of our God. In times of crisis, we may not immediately see the solution or understand how things will work out, but faith tells us that we are not alone. God is with us, working behind the scenes, even when we cannot see His hand at work. The importance of faith during times of difficulty also lies in the hope it provides. Hope is a powerful force. It is the belief that there is a way forward, that things can get better, and that the darkness will eventually give way to light. Hope keeps us going when we feel like giving up, and faith is what fuels that hope. When we trust in God, we can hold on to the hope that He will bring us through whatever situation we are facing, even when it seems impossible. Faith assures us that God is not only capable of delivering us from our difficulties, but that He has a plan for our lives that will ultimately bring us to a place of victory and growth. This kind of faith isn't passive, it's an active trust that requires us to make a choice to believe even when our circumstances suggest otherwise. Just like the Israelites had to trust God when they were standing at the edge of the Red Sea, we too must choose to trust in God's promises when we find ourselves in difficult situations. Trust in God doesn't mean that we sit back and do nothing. It means that we take the next step forward even when we don't have all the answers. It means that we continue to move forward with the confidence that God will provide a way even when we cannot see how. In many ways, the challenges we face in life are opportunities to grow in our faith. When everything is going well, it's easy to feel confident and self-sufficient. But when we are faced with a crisis, we are reminded of our need for God. Difficult situations strip away our illusions of control and force us to rely on something greater than ourselves. It's in these moments of vulnerability that our faith can grow stronger. As we trust God in the midst of our struggles, we begin to experience a deeper connection to Him and a greater understanding of His faithfulness. We learn that He is trustworthy, even when the circumstances seem to suggest otherwise. One of the most beautiful aspects of faith in difficult times is the peace that it brings. Faith in God doesn't necessarily remove the challenges we face, but it provides a peace that surpasses understanding. In the midst of crisis, when everything around us feels chaotic and uncertain, faith allows us to find calm in the storm. It's the peace that comes from knowing that God is in control, that He sees the bigger picture, and that He will bring us through to the other side. That peace isn't based on the absence of problems, but on the presence of a God who is greater than any problem we face. In the end, faith in difficult situations is not about having all the answers or understanding why things are happening. It's about trusting in God's goodness, His sovereignty, and His ability to turn even the most hopeless situations into opportunities for growth and glory. Just as the Israelites experienced God's miraculous deliverance at the Red Sea, we too can experience God's miraculous work in our own lives, even when the way forward seems unclear. Trusting God in difficult times gives us the courage to face challenges with hope and the confidence to know that He is with us every step of the way, making a way where there seems to be no way. Life has a way of presenting us with situations that feel out of our control. Whether it's an unexpected crisis, an unforeseen change in plans, or the constant demands of everyday life, the pressure to control everything can weigh us down. We think that if we can just manage every detail, we'll feel secure and at peace. But the truth is, the more we try to control, the more stress and anxiety we often accumulate. In trying to control every outcome, we lose sight of the one thing that can truly bring peace: surrendering to God's plan. Letting go of control opens us to a peace that goes beyond human understanding, a peace that remains steady even amidst life's storms. There's something profound about trusting God and releasing our grip on the things we can't control. It's as if we're lifting the heavy burden of responsibility that we weren't meant to carry in the first place. So much of our daily stress comes from trying to manage situations that are beyond our ability to influence. Whether it's worrying about our health, the future of our loved ones, or financial security, we often carry these concerns as if it's solely up to us to figure everything out. In doing so, we rob ourselves of peace because we're constantly in a state of tension, thinking that every detail depends on our effort. But peace doesn't come from control, it comes from surrender. When we choose to trust God with the outcomes of our lives, we begin to experience a deep sense of relief and tranquility. This kind of peace isn't based on circumstances, nor does it depend on how much we can control. It's rooted in the assurance that God has a plan even when we can't see it, and that His purpose is greater than anything we could orchestrate on our own. Releasing control may seem counterintuitive in a world that tells us to always be in charge and to take the reins of our lives, but the peace that comes from trusting God is not a passive peace. It's an active trust. When we let go of our need to control everything, we open ourselves to the peace that transcends understanding. This peace doesn't just ease our minds temporarily, it settles deep into our hearts, providing us with a sense of calm even in the midst of uncertainty and turmoil. Imagine the feeling of stepping off a tightrope and onto solid ground after a long time of balancing, walking carefully, and holding on to the illusion of control. There is relief in knowing that we no longer have to keep up the facade of being the ones who need to make everything happen. The pressure lifts and we can breathe again. This feeling is the peace that comes from trusting in God's perfect timing and His sovereignty. It's the peace that comes from acknowledging that while we may not have the answers, God does, and He will guide us through whatever we face. The human mind tends to focus on what's uncertain or unknown, which naturally leads to worry. We try to plan every step, anticipate every possible outcome, and prepare for what might go wrong. But the more we try to control these elements, the more we create a state of anxiety. There's always something left to worry about, something we haven't prepared for, or something outside of our reach. It's easy to become consumed by this constant pressure to anticipate and manage everything. But the more we let go of this desire for control and place our trust in God, the more we experience peace that doesn't rely on perfect outcomes or flawless plans. When we trust that God is at work behind the scenes, even when we can't see it, we release the need to make everything happen on our own. The result is a deep sense of peace that isn't contingent on circumstances. It's the kind of peace that holds steady in the storm because we know that God is with us, guiding us, and working everything together for good. This doesn't mean that life will be free of difficulties or challenges. It means that in the midst of those challenges, we can rest in the knowledge that God has everything under control. The Bible speaks of this peace in Philippians 4:6-7. Where we are told to not be anxious about anything, but to bring our requests to God in prayer. It goes on to say that when we do this, the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. This peace doesn't make sense in the eyes of the world. It's a peace that doesn't depend on getting everything right, having all the answers, or controlling every outcome. Instead, it's a peace that comes from trusting in God's ability to handle what we can't and knowing that He is always with us, providing the strength and comfort we need. Letting go of control also allows us to experience freedom. The freedom to live fully in the present moment without the constant burden of worry about what might happen in the future. When we are consumed by the need to control, we often miss out on the joy and peace that come from living in the here and now. By trusting God with our future, we are freed from the anxiety that comes with uncertainty. This freedom brings a sense of peace that isn't dependent on what's happening around us, but on the confidence that God is in control. It's important to recognize that letting go of control doesn't mean giving up responsibility. It doesn't mean that we sit idly by and wait for things to happen. Instead, it means acknowledging that we can only do so much and there are things beyond our control. It's about doing our part and then trusting that God will take care of the rest. When we let go of the illusion that we can control everything, we free ourselves from the pressure of trying to fix what's out of our hands. This peace that surpasses understanding is available to all who choose to trust God. It's not a peace that comes from solving every problem or orchestrating every detail. It's a peace that comes from surrender, surrendering our need for control